A kindler, gentler SEC, holy hack, and good news, everybody. Meme coins are not securities. All that and more coming up on Block and Order. Welcome to Block and Order, the show that explores the legal issues facing the world of Web3 and beyond. I'm Kyle Lawrence, and with me, as always, he's one of those the book is always better than the movie guys, Mr. Moish Peltz himself.
But the book is always better than the movie, Kyle.
Off the top of your head, what instance is true of that? I got
Look,
one.
I mean almost every instance, but
Oh
look,
gosh.
I'm a huge fan of the Lord of the Rings movie series. I've watched all the films, I've seen all the extended editions, I've even seen the Hobbit films which are not quite as
It's
great.
trash.
That's actually probably a really good example of where the book is way
Yeah,
better.
that's
As
a
good as
perfect
the films
example.
are, maybe the best fantasy films of all time,
Yeah,
the the books are better.
it's true. The books are
Now, Game of
incredible.
Thrones, I read the books after I started watching the series, and I was just like, you know what, these aren't that good because everything cool that happens in the books I already saw in the series.
It's
So
true. I
maybe it's
only read
also
the
just a
first one.
timing thing.
I only read the first one of those, and it was almost beat for beat the same exact thing as the first season of the show. Spoiler alert, everybody, by the way. And I don't know, I felt disinterested in continuing it. Love the Lord of the Rings books. I read the Hobbit book, and yeah, the Hobbit movies I'm not a fan of, but in the Battle of the Five Armies, I don't know what the five armies are. There's the humans, there's the elves, there's the dwarves, then there's the orcs, and then there's the worms things that tunnel through the ground. Seriously, I'm
You
that's not even a bit. I
you
don't
lost
know.
me like 90 seconds ago. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I mean
All right.
I'm sure I knew this when I was like 16, but
We have to post the graphics up on the screen of what they actually are because I saw that movie twice and I legit don't know what the fifth one. The Eagles? I don't know.
the eagle, yeah, there's probably eagle men.
It's ridiculous. Well, we could talk about Lord of the Rings all day and night, and God knows I'm capable of it. But alas, we have a lot to cover here on the show, Moish, don't we?
We always do, Kyle. We always do.
That we do. Why don't you kick us off with the top of the order, the huge story?
All right. Well, top of the order today is the SEC has declared that meme coins are not securities, but we're still going to police some fraud. But anyways, let's give a little round of applause to the SEC for finally, after 4 years of us saying, but Kyle, if only they could say what all of us think, it might just make it a little bit easier for people that participate in this market to both issue and buy
Yeah.
stuff, tokens, without being confused about how the law applies. But here we go. Applaud the SEC's crypto task force, the SEC's division of corporation finance, which issued a status statement. This is on last Thursday, February 27th, stating that meme coins are akin to collectibles. They do not involve the offer of sale of securities under the security laws and do not require registration with the SEC. So, what do you think, Kyle? Did the SEC get it right?
Yes, the SEC absolutely got it right. The crypto task force, headed by our good friend, Commissioner Hester Peirce, she heads the crypto task force. She clearly had a hand in this because this is codifying a lot of the things that she has been saying all along. This statement doesn't really, I don't want to say it changes things. It doesn't really move the needle because the SEC had been operating like this for really the past couple months, and it was obvious that this is what the guidance was going to be. But the fact that they actually put this down in writing and just told the world that this is how we're going to be policing or not policing these things is fantastic, and it's definitely a step in the right direction in a series of steps in the right direction that we've been experiencing and that we're going to continue to talk about on the show. Do you think that well, let me back up. What do you think is the next step for them? Because we're going to talk in a minute about the other things they've been doing. But now that they've said this about meme coins, what comes next? Is it actual legislation about how to do these things legally, or is it just go ahead, launch your meme coin, just don't defraud anybody?
Well, I mean, I think that's what this is, right? I mean, so it's you got to be a little careful, right? Because this is not a judicial opinion. This is not an opinion
Right.
of the full SEC commission, right? It's just
It's not law. Yeah.
it's not law. It's regulatory guidance, which may or not be correct and is not really binding in any real respect. So, um, it, Although I would say if you're a market participant that's now relying on this and you're saying, well, this is what the SEC has said, that meme coins are not securities. And the article says, here's what we define as a meme coin. This kind of meme coin is not a security. So you have to fit within those boundaries to even rely on whatever it's worth. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's a great starting point. Now, the SEC is now convening roundtables and inviting participants to come in and talk about different categories of tokens and whether they should or should not be regulated by the SEC and how so. So I think the idea is like, this is something that's in the news. That's low hanging fruit. We can just stand up and say that's not a security. That's easy for us to do. Now let's start diving into the issues of the ones which are perhaps a bit more complicated, and go from there. So I think that's great. I think that's exactly the right approach. That's how you regulate, right?
It's definitely nice to see the regulatory agency accepting these people. And we've talked about this a couple times. We talked about it with Commissioner Peirce, and the idea that if you're unsure of how to do this, you should be able to approach the SEC and say, hey, tell me what to do here. The fact that they're opening their doors, the fact that they're giving this guidance, it's just, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's another just correct move in a series of correct moves that they're finally making. Operation Choke Point is a thing of the past. Now we have a warmer, friendlier neighborhood SEC that is welcoming innovation and welcoming change and fostering these kinds of businesses. So obviously there's still a lot of riffraff out there. We see it all the time. There's still people who are, they are committing fraud. Let's call it what it is. And there's rug pulls out there. But the fact that you can now in good faith issue a meme coin and not have Sauron's eye gaze upon you, I think is a wonderful thing.
Nice callback to Lord of the Rings. I love it.
It all comes together. More good news from the SEC. We got a lot of dropped actions and investigations and whatnot. Just in the past couple weeks, the SEC has withdrawn cases against Gemini, Kraken, Consensus, the makers of MetaMask, Justin Sun and Tron, OpenSea, Ripple, and of course Coinbase, and suspended its investigations into Uniswap, Robinhood, and I think yesterday or 2 days ago was Yuga Labs. And lastly, they paused their lawsuit against Binance for a period of 60 days. Just interesting to note about Consensus and Yuga Labs specifically. Consensus, it was the SEC was arguing that they had engaged in securities violations related to staking services and some of the swapping features in their platform. And in Yuga Labs, the SEC initiated its probe in late 2022 to determine if the NFTs functioned similarly to traditional stocks and thus fell under U.S. securities laws, something that we've talked about a lot, something that's come up in the past couple of years with Stoner Cats and Impact Theory and LIBRA. So now that the fact that, Yuga Labs, this suit is being dropped, I wonder what those guys are thinking. But Moish, I mean, I know what you think, but what do you think about this? This is great.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's great. These are all cases that we were scratching our head and like, how's this going to go? I hope this doesn't, like, who knows what a district court judge is going to do when they see these things and whether they're really going to understand crypto, and what's the likelihood that one of these cases results in this kind of crazy adverse result that says
Mm.
something which everyone that's participating in this market says, I don't think that's a security. I don't think that's a securities transaction. I don't think they're offering anything with the expectation of profit to fit the Howey test. Yet we do have some of these decisions out there, like the Ripple decision, and so look, I think it's great that these cases are being withdrawn. I would just say, just because they withdrew a case, and in fact, in almost all the dismissals, they're saying we're not withdrawing this case as a concession that what the company is doing or has issued, the tokens they have issued, are not securities. We're withdrawing the case because we feel like, for whatever reason, we want to withdraw the case. There should be no precedential value to the withdrawal of the case. So, I mean, that's the position they're taking. And so this is like the flip side of what we were just saying, how they're working hard to get roundtables together and start defining different kinds of tokens and what they are and how you can issue them and whether they're securities or something else. But this is not really part of this. Is like pulling back the enforcement, but it's not providing real guidance.
Isn't it, but in that vein, one can make the argument that the very existence of the enforcement action. So we're saying that they're not withdrawing the case because they're saying what they're doing is okay. They're not saying that. However, the imposition of the case in the first place, it was almost just presumptively, we don't understand what you're doing, but what you're doing is wrong, and therefore we're going to haul you into court. It's kind of the inverse of that. which is kind of an interesting way to think about it, because some of these things aren't securities. It's obvious they weren't, yet they were being forced to spend millions of untold sums to lawyers to fight these causes of action, which is silly to me. So the fact that, and I, by the way, I agree with you, but it's just an interesting paradigm to look at these cases and just see the paradigm shift from one administration to the next.
Well, I think both can be true, right? It can be ridiculous that they ever brought a suit saying that a Bored Ape is a security. Like
Right.
that can be ridiculous, but it still stands that their withdrawal of the case doesn't mean that it's a concession that it's not a
Right.
security. And it was styled as an investigation, right? It's like, well, we've investigated and we're just not going to bring an action at this time for any one of a million reasons. It could just be, political, or I don't like my hair today, or whatever else, right?
Right. I don't know, it reminds me of the line from the movie Thank You for Smoking, a great movie from I think 2008, where Aaron Eckhart gets on, gives an interview on national television. He says, if Congress says, still my invitation is out there, and they're like, it's called a subpoena. It's like, it's all on how you phrase it. We'll post the link. We'll post the actual clip of him saying it. I delivered that terribly, but you get the idea.
No, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, it's a subpoena. Yeah, it's not an invitation. All right. Next topic on the order is the crypto reserve. So President Trump has finally announced details on, or has announced that they're planning on launching details for a U.S. crypto reserve, which initially was launched discussing, Bitcoin, XRP, Solana, Cardano, and Ethereum. There was a bit of controversy over the order of which those 5 cryptocurrencies were announced, and whether that is the first and right 5 cryptocurrencies that should be part of reserve. A lot of Bitcoiners are saying, well, it should just be Bitcoin and nothing else, which I kind of agree with. So Kyle, what do you think? Is that the right first 5? Should it only be Bitcoin? Is this the right first step by the administration?
Well, we've talked a lot about this, and there's been a lot of scuttlebutt about this. Obviously, we were there in Nashville when he announced it, and Cynthia Lummis announced it as well about the Bitcoin Reserve. And Bitcoin makes sense for a variety of reasons. And you definitely brought up the fact when we talked about it subsequently about the states introducing legislation to create similar reserves. And you said, well, a national reserve is great, but if everybody has their own reserve and they're going to treat it differently, what does that mean? That's going to lessen the effect of what they're trying to do. And in some of the conversations I've had since this news came out the other day, I mean, Bitcoin, we all agree that this is a good thing. But when you start introducing some of the altcoins, does that dilute the benefit of what they're doing, even though they're different? And does this, I don't know if it carries necessarily the same weight because they're not as scarce as Bitcoin is. And the rest of the world doesn't necessarily treat these assets the same way. It just seems like they're overplaying their hand a little. I don't know. Something smells off to me.
Well, I think for me the big distinction is Bitcoin, as far as we know, has no issuer, it has no promoter, it has no one. There's no foundation. I mean, at least not driving. It's you know, the backbone of it, right? There might be fans of Bitcoin. There's the Bitcoin conference, which that's even where Trump made the announcement, right? So he's saying the Bitcoin reserve at the Bitcoin conference, but here we are, and there's 4 other tokens attached to it. Whereas Ethereum, Ripple, Solana, Cardano are obviously do have promoters, they do have foundations, they do have people that are incentivized to get these tokens into the reserve. So I think that's for me the big difference. It feels to me like a scary and slippery slope of
Yeah.
now you have an incentive for profit motivated actors. I'm not saying that specifically about any of the particular foundations here, but if you're the 6th or 10th crypto and you want your token included in the reserve, now you're very heavily incentivized to start
Yeah.
getting really political and say, here's why my token's great. Here's all the things I'm doing at Mar-a-Lago. I'm attending the White House Crypto Summit that's coming up, and I want my token to be in the next batch of reserve assets.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm concerned that that's gonna splash back and make the industry look like the whole point is to pump bags and not to have some larger, more universal purpose behind the reserve.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, as always, and well thought out. You know, what's interesting, and we don't really talk too much about markets, on the show because we're a legal show. But as soon as that announcement came out, I mean, all these altcoins shot up 30%, and everything was great. And then the next day, Monday morning, everybody got back to their desk and saw the news about tariffs and trade wars and all these things, and it just immediately got wiped out in 24 hours.
It is
Eh,
pretty funny that we're still, like,
what goes up must come down, I
yeah, there you go.
guess. Argentina's President Milei is under fire for promoting the Libra meme coin that resulted in millions of dollars in lost profits for investors who were subject to this alleged rug pull. On February 14th, happy Valentine's Day, President Milei promoted the Libra cryptocurrency through his official social media account. This endorsement caused the token's value to surge from virtually nothing to $5.20 within about 40 minutes. However, the value plummeted by 85% shortly thereafter as the founders, holding 70% of the token, sold off their shares, resulting in approximately 87 million in profits for them and significant losses for around 74,000 investors, including my dear friend Mr. Moish.
I'll raise my hand as having lost some money on Libra.
And look, the only reason I didn't get it on it is because I was not at home when it when it was announced. Let's just be honest. So would have been right there with you, buddy. You know
It,
what?
not the
It,
first, and won't be the last.
not the first, and certainly not the last. Since then, there's been a lot of criminal complaints filed against the president, including allegations of fraud, breach of public duty. Opposition parties are calling for his impeachment, and both Argentina and U.S. authorities, including the FBI, are investigating the matter. Is this another Hawk Tua? I mean, what culpability does he have? Yes, he promoted it, but was he the subject to bad advice? What happened here?
And that's what it sounds like. We don't have all the facts, and we'll, reserve judgment until we get them, and if and when it's, discussed in a court proceeding. But from the outside looking in, it sure seems like he just was asked if he wanted to promote a coin like any other influencer, except
Right.
instead of being any other influencer, he's the, leader of a sovereign state, and that resulted in a really crazy. I mean, just being around on the market at that time,
Yeah.
it's just the amount of volume, and you just feel it in the market is nuts. And then for that to just immediately evaporate is just such an abrupt and like insane feeling, right?
It's
So
true.
so that's what happened, right? Tens of thousands of people who bought the token got rug pulled, and who are they going to look to? The actual legal founders of the project, or the president of a sovereign country who promoted it on his
Right.
Twitter account? So I think the answer is probably both. But there's consequences, right? And so this is something that we talk about all the time: is if you're just an unwary promoter of someone else's token, you got to be careful, right? You don't know. I mean, this is 40 minutes, and there's billions of dollars of losses. You got to be careful what you promote. You got to be careful how you talk about it. You got to make sure all the legal things are in place, and you got to ultimately be prepared for the blowback if things go
Yeah.
awry, as they did here.
No, it's true. It's a great point. And it's worth noting that since this incident, the meme coin market has been just absolute garbage for anybody who's actively or was actively trading it. It's been really in the dumps since then. But if I can ask you a tricky question, assuming that the SEC's statement from last week is settled law, how would that fit in here to this specific thing? Is this fraud just because he
Wow.
promoted it on his social media channel? Because he could be like, I didn't know. I just work here. I'm only the president. What do I know? I'd be curious to take your temperature on that.
It is a tricky question, but I like the setup, which is, okay, this is a meme coin that has well, is it a meme coin? I mean, the pitch was as a meme coin. They explicitly said this is a meme coin, but there was, I think, some utility inherent in it, and that the proceeds were going to be used for development,
Yeah,
in like low income areas in
like
Argentina, which
like
is
the
certainly a
CAR
worthy
token.
cause, right?
Yeah,
And I think if they had said, "Hey, just like give us money," well, maybe they would have gotten something like that. I don't know, right? Um, but then, if Malay is promoting something that, let's just take as an assumption that it's not a security because it's a meme coin, and he's promoting a non-security meme coin, then yeah, is there is there any, is it just, it's a non-security, you can do whatever you want, buyer beware, sorry you lost a lot of money? Or is this to the level of fraud where the project was saying, here's what you can expect in
Yeah.
terms of distribution and use of funds of proceeds and what we're marketing and what Milei is saying, and that the reality of what happened post launch materially differed from that in a way that was actually fraudulent. Um, and I don't know, right? I think this is a good point, right? Of even if you say, okay, this is definitively a meme coin, there's no registration requirement. Are these guys out of the out of the forest here? And I think the answer is
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Be curious to see how this unfolds in the coming weeks. If there is an impeachment proceeding, if there is more court proceedings, and just more information comes to light. Maybe this guy was the puppet master behind it all. Who knows? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, but you're right. Either way, this ended up being the turning point of the entire meme coin market, and almost everything after this has been, uh, I don't know, a disappointment.
N-
What's the right word?
Not great. The trenches are not a happy place right now.
The trenches have gone from a fun, stylish, money making trench to like the World War I, like you're up to your knees in like mud trench.
You're
So,
breathing mustard gas. Yeah, it
oh my,
sucks.
yeah, the mustard gas has come out. Someone should write some poetry about these meme coin trenches.
Producer Sean, it's up to you.
All right, on to our next order topic. There was recently A16Z, or Andreessen Horowitz Cryptos division, released a token taxonomy report, which the authors, friends of the show, Miles Jennings, Scott Commoners, and Eddie Lazarin, attempted to categorize tokens, all sorts of tokens, whatever token there might be, into essentially 7 distinct types. And we can go through here, but the 7 types are network tokens, security tokens, company-backed tokens, arcade tokens, collectible tokens, asset-backed tokens, and meme coins, which we've talked a bit about on the show already. So, Kyle, before we even get into the different types of tokens and how they differ, um, what's your thoughts on the value of their attempt to try and break up and divide all the different types of tokens out in the sea into these 7 types?
I think this is a great distillation of the different ways in which you can create a token like this. We've seen different attempts, but this is probably the most concise and the clearest. And we can post a link to the article in the show notes just so everybody can see the chart that they provided. Look, we get calls from clients all the time who say, I'm doing this thing. Is that a security token? And we try to walk through. It's like, well, it's kind of a utility token, or it's like, well, nah, it's really just a meme coin. The reality is there are different ways to classify these kinds of tokens. And one of the things that you and I have talked about a lot is the fear that I've had that when Congress does ultimately release legislation on these things, it's just going to be one broad brush and they're not going to distinguish between different types of assets, NFTs, stable coins, utility tokens. And now when we have this, it's a great step in the right direction. I feel like I'm saying that a lot today, but that's what it is. And I think that if we introduce this into the narrative and people start to understand the differences, it's only going to help us create a better product and help us legislate and define what is not allowed depending on what you're doing. This is great. I love this.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, my first impression was all these distinctions are almost meaningless because any token, it can evolve. A it can be 1 or 2 or 7 of these different things depending how it's used in its ecosystem and depending on which technology it relies on, which could even allow like an NFT to convert into a security token, which can convert into an asset-backed token, a network, etc. Right? So like all these
Mm-hmm.
things could be one thing. So that's why I'm like a little bit like, well, why are we dividing them up? Is it just a distinction that doesn't really matter? But hearing what you're saying and hearing you say it and hearing Andreessen Horowitz say it, I think is true. Is you really need. I think it's a useful way to break them up and say these are 7 different types of tokens, and the regulations need to be different for each different little token, and that a security token, which represents a stock or a bond like on NASDAQ, but in tokenized
Mhm.
form, should be regulated differently than an NFT, which should be regulated differently than an asset backed token, which should be regulated differently than a network token, which they're defining as like a layer one, like Ethereum consensus style token. So that makes sense to me, and I think it makes sense to break it and distill it into more simple terms. And I think part of why they're doing it now, with the I'm just assuming that with the crypto roundtables of the SEC and the roundtable happening at the White House, it's starting to make the conversation about how we're going to regulate these different tokens, how the legislation that's pending is going to treat these things, so we can have a more you know like common ground when it comes to vocabulary.
Sure. That and the fact that you're seeing a lot of companies and developers and just companies all over the world talk about asset-backed tokens, and you're just going to start seeing that kind of push happen more and more in the coming years. So I think it's a worthy distinction. I hear what you're saying, but the fact is that these things are different. A utility token or
Well,
an
you're saying utility
asset-backed
token,
token.
but the utility token's not their thing. So I think that's part of the problem. Is a utility token could be, I think, three or four of these. It could be a network token, it could be a company backed token, it could be an arcade token, it could be an asset backed token, it could even be a meme coin, right? But
Right.
I think they're saying
Well,
it's like, let's drop utility token. That's just not a useful
I was going to get
definition.
into like a governance token versus, you have a video game and you have an ecosystem and you need tokens to ascend, from level to level in the game. Like that's not a, that's a worthy of a distinction. Is much different than a token evidencing an ownership in a real estate fund. It's that kind of thing. And I think that's where the distinction I mean, it sounds obvious, but it's so obvious no one had ever really said it before.
Right. We're still kind of having these basic building blocks.
Right.
But I think that's exactly it. And that's why when you were saying what you're saying, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. The market is just saying, I want a utility token. I want
Mhm.
I mean, meme coin. A meme coin is one of the ones in here, but it like the vocabulary is just too big and too unhelpful. And
Yeah.
so defining new categories that we can use to refer to different styles of regulatory approaches to each style of token, even if in reality it's more complicated on the back end and they're all kind of merge into one and evolve and whatever else, at least we have some common vocabulary for how regulation could regulate different uses of different styles of tokens.
Last up on the order, Bybit. Oh my goodness, they were
Oh
hacked.
my goodness.
Oh my heavens. Oh my word. Oh hot dog.
Heavens,
North
oh
Korean
heavens.
hackers. Oh heavens, oh heavens. North Korean hackers are suspected in the historic theft of 1.4 billion in Ethereum from Bybit. 1.4 billion with a B. The hackers exploited a flaw, in the wallet transfer process by focusing on the cold to warm wallet transfer, where funds move between offline and online storage. They allegedly replaced Bybit's multi-sig contract with a malicious one and used blind signature tactics to bypass security checks. The attack happened very quickly, showing automated fund movements and a predetermined strategy to hide the stolen assets. They also took staked Ether tokens, making recovery more difficult. My goodness, Moish, the biggest hack in crypto history. I mean, where to begin? What do you think about this? This is insanity.
I mean, the scale of it's insane. The fact that they exploited a multi-sig contract, which everyone's like, this is safe. We have multiple signers. We
Yeah,
know what we're doing. It's sophisticated exchange. The fact they bypassed that is insane. The fact that they were immediately able to I think launder and clear almost all the funds
yeah,
is insane. Um, I'm it's unbelievable. I mean, I know here we are, it's 2025 and the market cap of crypto's $2 trillion. So like the market cap is larger, the exploits are going to be relatively larger. I get that, but it's just it's stunning to see all that happen in like basically a week.
yeah.
And I think the reality is, this is going to ask a lot of people. I mean, like as much regulatory progress as we've made, these are the kinds of things, right? North Korea clearing $1.5 billion in
Allegedly.
hacked proceeds is one of those huge setbacks that says, what are we doing here? Why are we
Yeah.
regulating you guys so loosely? Why don't we start cracking down on stuff? Like that's the real fear.
To me, the most interesting aspect of the fallout from this is the fact that the crypto community was debating whether Ethereum should reverse some of the transactions to recover these stolen funds, similar to the 2016 DAO hack. But opponents of that saying, well, the rollback would undermine blockchain's immutability, which is the core principle of decentralization. So, I mean, that's a pretty interesting argument to be made. It's where do you land on that? I don't know. What's correct, what's right and wrong. I mean, people lost their shirt, through no fault of their own.
Yeah, I mean, same concept, right? I mean, in 2016 with the DAO hack, and that was almost 10 years ago now. We're in a very different crypto world, and I think the idea that we would just roll back the Ethereum blockchain in the same way is almost unthinkable. I think maybe it's if we do a targeted fork that just deletes the North Korean wallets and either freezes or rolls that money somewhere more useful. I guess let's hear the idea, but I don't know. It seems complicated. It
Yeah.
seems like this is really a geopolitical question, not a technology question. But the reality is, the technology enabled North Koreans to clear all this money, and that's a problem.
You said 2016 was almost 10 years ago, and I wanted to punch you. Lovingly, but nonetheless.
As I was saying it, I was like, yeah, someone please punch me in the face. So I'll take it.
I would never do such a thing. Don't say that.
We don't condone violence here at Block and Order.
No, exactly. Violence is bad. Well, thank you for joining us on this episode of Block and Order. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. If you have any comments, please leave them leave them down below. We take those comments very seriously, and we try to reply to all of them. Don't forget to follow us on all our socials. Links are down below in the show notes. Please note that this show is meant for informational and entertainment purposes only. This is not legal advice, except no violence, no punching Moish. Please hire your own attorney if you're going to take the plunge down the rabbit hole. Neither the discussion of nor the fact that Moish and I may own any of the assets that we discuss on the show is meant to serve as an endorsement of such assets. Very special thank you to producer Sean, who has homework in this episode based on our discussion prior. So on behalf of Moish Peltz, I'm Kyle Lawrence. Take care, everybody.
See you next time.